Hi, it's Daniel and Ruth again, live
Hi.
from Tel Aviv, and this is Israel Uncovered. And the one thing we wanted to chat about, I actually wanted to chat about, and you wanted to chat
Yeah.
about, is all the protests happening in Tel Aviv, in Israel. There's all sorts of protests, anti-government protests, protests for the hostages, all these things. So I am not an activist. I don't go to protests. I have an opinion on protests. You have your opinion on protests. You are more of an activist. You have been a bit more of an activist over the
Yeah.
past couple of years. So basically, you can do the talking. I'm going to ask more questions because I really don't know. I don't really fully understand why. What are people protesting
Okay.
about, especially when it comes to government protests?
Okay. So I'm going to take you back to February 2023, when the government the Israeli government we currently have, they were elected in October 2022. They then came to power, I think, in the December, and the protests really started erupting in the January 2023, and it was on a huge scale. 100,000 angry Israelis taking to the streets week in, week out to protest this very far right government.
Okay.
I had dinner with very, very good friends of mine on February 14th, 2023. They had already been protesting against the government, were trying to persuade me to join them at the protests, and I was a bit hesitant. I didn't quite know enough. I wasn't really sure.
In England?
No, here.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes, here. And something I really wasn't particularly clued up on at all was the political landscape of Israel. I really hadn't paid much attention to it.
Right.
But for me to have friends, these two friends in particular, for me they were the pillars of Israeli society. They really held up. They are the epitome of what Tel Aviv society certainly represents. So they both worked in high tech and startups, homeowners. They had two young girls. Anyway, February 2023, we went for dinner, and they said, Ruth, we are taking our money out of Israel. We are going to Canada in July, and our eldest daughter doesn't want us to return. This really, really shook me, because I really never expected, if anyone was to leave Israel, it was not Tovit and Omer. It was not these friends. Yeah, they are Israelis through and through. These aren't people who made Aliyah and have been here 3 years and that, this is, for me, they were the absolute, as I said earlier, pillars of the Israeli society. And they were angry and they were pissed off.
It sounds a little bit like the whole Trump thing, though. People saying, "I'm leaving America. I'm going to Canada. I hate Trump." Why did they? Number one, what were they protesting about?
So
why
it was
did they hate the government, and why did
because
they
they felt
leave?
that the democratic character of Israel was going to dramatically change due to this judicial reform, which was on the table.
Okay.
And so, put it this way, that dinner really, really shook me. It really shook me. And when I got back to the UK, I was like, Israel's in trouble. I spoke to a few people. So I spoke to David Davidi Brown, who is the CEO of the New Israel Fund, and my rabbi, Charlie Baginski, she was also. And then I found the protest movement and started protesting in London and here from March 2023 against this extreme far-right government and the judicial overhaul.
When you say extreme far-right government,
yeah,
what do you mean? Because actually, in many ways, actually, Netanyahu is a bit of a centrist.
I agree. I agree. But he got into bed with extreme.
The coalition is
the
with
coalition,
right.
And for me, and for many others, they are Jewish terrorists. And the Ben Gvirs, the Smotrich, the Rothman, dreadful characters. Yariv Levine, I'll never forget on October the 7th when Tom Friedman was interviewed on CNN. He immediately pinpointed October 7th, the blame on Yariv Levine. And I found that, I mean, everyone was in so much shock. He is the Justice Minister.
Okay.
Who is the architect of this judicial overhaul.
But again, everyone would blame everybody else. I just think my question is, you might hate them, the people in the coalition, everything. They got elected by the people. Like, a lot of people vote for them. And something else I would say is, when you say these two people for you, they're the pillars of Israeli society, Tel Aviv is still a bit of an echo chamber. And most of Israel did not, they did vote for Netanyahu and they did vote for this government. So I understand you don't like it.
Yeah.
But, democracy comes with accepting the outcome of an election.
It does, but then you can't change the democratic character of a country. And I think when we saw thousands of women getting dressed up as handmaids, echoing scenes from Margaret Atwood's A Handmaid's Tale, and the message of women being, dehumanized. That was
I saw that, but but do you actually think it's representative of what is happening to women in Israel today?
I think
this hyperbole and drama. Basically, like, how much of it? Because I worried when I saw all these, when I saw people, like you said, from this Tel Aviv echo chamber that are not representative of how Tel Aviv thinks, just posting this stuff about women, I'm scared for my daughters in Israel and all of that. I was like, people that have never been here, they think we're living in Kabul. So there's something that doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah. I think Tel Avivians, people who live in Tel Aviv, people who live in Jerusalem, it can be just complete polar opposites of mentality.
Yeah, or anywhere else actually outside of Israel. I just feel like outside of Tel Aviv, it's a bit like in the US or in England. People outside the M25 are like, completely different as like all these media people in London, like, or like in the US, outside New York and California, all of like this huge majority of people that just don't think like those elites, highly paid, here is working in tech, in the UK might be a lawyer, someone working in media. I don't know. I guess my question is, what were you protesting for and what were you trying to achieve?
We were trying to scrap the judicial overhaul.
Okay. Balances of power, and people felt like the balance tipped too much towards the government, but and
they were trying to destroy the court. They were trying to undermine it.
But it's a very complex issue, and the court was also like heavily biased and skewed as it was. So like this, I also see that they were not able to pass lots of things, and the way the members of the court were chosen was also unfair. So there's lots of issues. The question is, you said that if it wasn't for this specific law, people would have been totally fine with the current government. I don't think so.
No. I think there are a few things going on. I think a lot of secular Israelis who work, pay taxes, do the army, reserve duty, were just feeling very pissed off that they feel that they prop up this growing Haredi population in Israel.
Haredi is religious, by the way.
Haredi is religious, but I think also one thing to mention at this point is Ben Gurion, and when he founded Israel, there was no constitution in place.
Right.
And so I really didn't realize how without a constitution, how weak and how weak a system can be.
Mm-hmm.
And so Ben Gurion also, at the time, I think there were about 400 Haredi people here when he founded it. I don't think he ever thought for one moment that they would stay and grow in the way that they had, therefore putting the pressure on the secular Israelis to do army, pay the taxes, all of that. So I think that was very problematic, and part of, because there was no constitution in place.
I think that's always the case, though, that people, that's kind of like what riles people up, that people are either angry or jealous or envious of another group of people, that they feel everyone feels that they disproportionately contribute to a country and they don't do enough.
Yeah.
So it's the same, like, in England people would say like, oh, like these migrants staying in hotels, why we old people cannot pay for this or this and that. So like, I think that's the typical rhetoric of like hating on a group, whether it's like the religious or the, or whatever, like, or like the Arab group or this group or that group, and kind of like blame them because of hate and envy. So I just think, how much of it is hate and envy? How much of it is concern from democracy? How much of it is about women issues? I just hear like a lot of like, I just don't know. If to me, it sounds a little bit more like people here that are like anti-Bibi have been anti-Bibi for many, many years.
They have.
So I also think there's an element of like Bibi derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
But
I think Bibi does need to go. He's been along. It's just, I think
that's fine, but I think I agree with that. But I also accept that he has been chosen. So, like, I didn't vote for him. I agree that he's been around for too long, but I also think there's a lack of clarity, and I always try to find where's the line between like, what are you trying to tell me? Are you bothered about like, his corruption case because he accepted a bunch of cigars from this billionaire? Are you upset because of women issues? Are you upset because of like the religious? Are you upset because of you defending democracy? Like what?
I think the main issue was feeling that the liberal democratic nature and character of Israel was being attacked.
That's how people.
And
again,
do
you think that's how?
And I agreed with it. I also felt the same way, and I wasn't a big protester or activist.
Right.
But for whatever reason, I was taking to those streets, both here and in London, for week in, week out.
Right.
And
I mean, the way I see it is also that we keep seeing this story or this blueprint of small minority of usually more privileged people, whether it's in Tel Aviv or in New York or in Madrid or in wherever, taking to the streets to say, my leader is a dictator, democracy is under threat. Even in the UK, people call like Keir Starmer two-tier Keir, you're totalitarian, authoritarian. So everyone is trying to paint the leaders in the democratic world as dictators and tyrants. So my question is, who's the beneficiary of it? So, is that benefiting your country, or is that benefiting the actual dictators and totalitarian regimes in Russia or in Iran or in China, which are actually trying proactively to destabilize democracies?
Yeah.
So, my question always ends up being, I understand your concerns, but is this movement, are these protests that we're just seeing literally copycats of in all these Western democracies, are they not just like, are you not being useful idiots for somebody else's chess game in Tehran or in, or in Russia?
Yeah, I think I really agree with the term useful idiots, and I think there is a place for it. I wouldn't have said that before October 7th. And this year, my views on it all has changed somewhat, and I can't really pinpoint or explain how I feel now. It's difficult to.
Right.
I still feel very much anti this government.
Right.
I still would prefer for them to go. I also get that they were democratically elected, and we just might have to put up and shut up.
Right.
I also think.
Also, priorities change when you're under
attack. Change when you're under attack. But yeah, I think for me it was I was quite surprised by myself with how I joined that movement, and something, you know, in a way that something else, even bigger issues, women issues,
Right.
I may not have joined a protest movement. This I did, and I felt very strongly.
Yeah.
And but my views have changed now, and
Yeah.
and everything has become quite foggy and muddled and a bit, you know, ick.
Yeah, because like, you know, I mean, war changes your priorities.
Yeah.
And you see things differently, and at the end of the day, if your survival is at stake, then all the, you know, this law for the, you know,
Yeah.
of the rearrangement, that the judicial system or something like that, it kind of like takes like a second.
So it does. It does.
Takes second stage, and I just think in a way that is. It's actually a privilege to go to the street and shout that
it is, and absolutely, I think
Prime Minister is a dictator.
It does show that democracy is thriving here.
Exactly.
And I think that is, you know, if that is a positive thing. However, you know, when water cannons are being, you know, used to disperse the protesters, it's heavy-handed. There were, you know, but no one. You're never going to know the nitty gritty of what's really going on. There were, you know, some people were arrested a few weeks ago for firing flares at BB's house.
Well, they should.
You know,
be.
that was too much. You know,
what was too much? That they were arrested?
No, that they were firing flares in the first place.
Of course.
You know, like
it's
supposed to be non-violent protests, and I think the majority of them were, and I think certainly in 2023.
Well, that's the problem. It's like it starts with mostly peaceful, and then it descends into chaos.
Yeah.
So whose interest is to create this chaos? That's why, like, I'm always trying to look at the strategic.
I think now they've kind of crossed over with the hostages, and I feel like it's all quite foggy. But our priority now, I think, as a nation, as a country, is to bring our hostages home. And on that note,
yeah, I mean, I never protest. My view on protest is that I'm too lazy. I have no intention or ambition to save the world. I just want to be home with my Netflix, with my Doritos, just like watching Made in Manhattan.
Yeah.
So but in terms of protest, I think, you know, if someone wanted to destroy the park in your neighborhood to build a car park, and there's like 20 people in front of the local council or something saying, no, you cannot destroy our little pond. I can't sign up to that.
Yeah.
Like anything that is like so massive and so organized, and especially I always read what the protests say. So like, you know, I actually used to walk past all the protests against Netanyahu, and I read what the signs were saying, and like, this, you're a dictator, you betrayed us, you this, you that. I'm like the hostages protest, you know, if he's like, release the hostages, great. But when he goes into, you know, sign a deal, Netanyahu betrayed us, you're the worst, you this and that, when literally all the bullet points in the banners match 1-to-1 the propaganda videos from Hamas, you've got a problem. And the same with the pro-Palestine. If you say like, you know, peace in the Middle East, coexistence in Israel, peace in Israel and Gaza, stop the war, I can sign up to that.
Yeah.
But if you start saying resistance is justified from the river to the sea, this and that, literally you start seeing all the bullet points from Hamas, then I'm like, that's not a peaceful protest. Same with the Black Lives Matter. Anti-racism, I can sign up to that.
I think the protests here, the anti-government protests, have been peaceful. They have not. There have been a few incidents, they haven't been incidents where it's not incident.
Yeah,
it's not
correct. They haven't really turned into violence. But I would say something: the rhetoric and the language and the stuff that I saw written and the postcards, they are hate marches against Netanyahu. They are not peace. They are not about democracy. They are not about judicial. All the things I saw were like literally like Trump derangement syndrome. Like he became the face of like this. He has been turned, like Yuval Harari says it, like, you know, democracy only works between friends, and he has become this image that he's an enemy of the state. And I asked lots of people in Tel Aviv in this little echo chamber, and they would say, yeah, he's an enemy of the state. So they were like, he should be in jail, you're the cause of all evils, it's your fault the hostages, it's your fault the war. So I think that's where I get really uncomfortable. And like I was gonna say, like also with the Black Lives Matter, can I sign up? Yeah, no racism, or Black Lives Matter, everything great. But the moment you start saying defund the police, America's racist, this and that, this and the other, no, I'm not comfortable with that. And because for some reason, all these mega protests so quickly, especially the huge ones that are organized, if it's like 4 people in a street corner, I'm like, good for you, go out and protest. But these mega movements that are so well funded and so organized and that so quickly derange into something else, I always feel like, people are just being played. I don't know.
I would agree with that more now.
Right.
Last year, I was fully 100% behind the Kaplan force.
Right.
And I agreed more or less word for word with what was said, and I was taking to those streets with my flag here, there. This year, on, off, and it's more to do with how I feel about everything, which has been so changeable and very, very confusing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, let's see how 2025.
Yeah, a lot of mixed feelings, but it's always interesting, and I just always kind of like, just to end and to wrap up, I just think I get really upset when people say, well, even like people internally are so discontent, but people often forget that people protesting here against the government is to have a better country,
yes,
to live better.
Yeah, we all.
People outside protesting against Netanyahu is usually because they want to delegitimize Israel and see it's gone from the map. So I also think it's very important to say that people protesting here is out of
absolute
love,
absolute love, and there's no way I would have. That's the
why
thing,
they don't go and protest with Israeli flags.
And that's why I took to the streets, because I love this place, and I wasn't going to see its liberal democratic nature be swept from under the carpet, like swept away. And so, yeah.
Of course, that's why like people are totally like patriotic as well, and go with flags and everything.
Much more sort of patriotic, I think, here than I am in the UK.
Yeah.
And I think we've just got more to lose here.
Yeah, I agree. Good. Thank you so much for that beautiful insight. And on that note, thank you. Like and subscribe, or you'll watch some of the clips on social media, and we'll keep chatting about interesting stuff. Thank you so much.
Take care.